Hey besties, it's Cam from the internet. Welcome back to another episode of me talking about whatever is on my mind. And today, that topic is gender or lack thereof. So we're going to talk about it. And this episode is actually brought to you by a couple of things. The buck-wild nature of someone in my TikTok DMs just the other day accusing me of co-opting being non-binary when I'm, and I quote, just a cishet who wants woke points. I'm making quotey fingers if you're not watching this video. But then also the hilarity of me cosplaying all manner of gender nonconformity at a fan convention. If y'all were at KatsuCon in National Harbor, Maryland over Valentine's Day weekend, and you were at the Locked 2 meetup, you probably saw me there. I was one of the Camilla Hects, and I was there all weekend cosplaying all manner of characters. And both of those things, both the cosplay and the gender nonconformity there and the buck wild message on TikTok, led me to think about gender and, as the title of this episode suggests, my curious case of gender indifference. I do feel the need to disclaim here, I am not a gender studies scholar. I am not an expert on the topic. I'm just a person, and so because of that, this episode is largely just me sharing anecdotes and kind of just talking about my journey through all things gender related. I believe very strongly that the more that people share these experiences, especially now in this climate, the more that people share their experiences of self-discovery or how they found this element of themselves or whatever it be, the more impactful those conversations can be on other people's journeys and other people's experiences. So, with all of that said, let's talk about Cam versus gender. I grew up with an almost dichotomous approach to gender. In many ways, gender roles were not impressed upon me, like, at all, while in others, they were incredibly present, and I think upon reflection that was likely due to like internalized misogyny and institutional misogyny more than like any sort of serious intent. As an example, like I was raised to know that I could watch, read, play with, write, whatever I wanted. Like my gravitation toward like just picking hobbies that, you know, lots of little kids had. I gravitated toward ballet and toward hockey with equal enthusiasm, and I did both, and there was not an issue. My mom would shut down relatives who made some comment about, you know, me being too much of a boy or too much of a girl or a tomboy. She was like, no, 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 we don't do that here. For context, I was homeschooled, and so my mother was very active in those elements of my life. At the same time, the churches that I attended all growing up were the type of churches that lectured on how girls shouldn't cause men to stumble, boys to stumble by what we wear. And there was always this ongoing rhetoric at home about how my body was inherently wrong or sexual or bad because of things I couldn't control, especially because I hit puberty really early. I am chronically ill and my hormones are all messed up because of aforementioned chronic illness. And so what that meant is that I was 11 when I hit puberty, and it hit me like a bus, baby. I never had a training bra phase. I went straight into having like almost B cups. And by the time I was 12 or 13, my mom was having me shop in the Kohl's women's business wear section, and all I was allowed to wear were like super long, you know, billowy tent style tunics and like leggings as long as the tunics covered down to my knee. My chest was always a huge issue. Like I was constantly being told that my tits were the worst thing about my body and that I had to cover them up because it was just so inappropriate and scandalous, and you get the drift. And then I got older, and the dichotomy became a bit more obvious because I was lectured or scolded for not being like feminine enough in appearance, while my interests in media and my interests in hobbies and my friends were quote unquote traditionally masculine. And that was just like, oh, that's Cam being Cam. Like markedly, I had to wear for one of my first jobs a button-down shirt. Now, obviously, at that point in time, I had triple Ds, and not even the most compressing sports bra in the universe could keep those darn button-down shirts from gapping. And so I did some research and ironically stumbled upon the concept of binders. And I worked, I had a paycheck, so I bought a binder with my own money and I put the binder on. And lo and behold, the shirt did not gap. And I so ecstatic. I ran out of the bedroom like, hey, mom, I found a way to solve the problem. Look, the shirt fits. And her response was not, oh, thank God, that's such a practical option. It was more of a, well, now you don't look like a girl because your chest is flat. Like, what's the deal? Which was maddening to me at the time because I was just like, hey, I solved the problem. And then at the same time, then she would turn around and I went to, action movies. All my friends were guys and she had no problem with that. It was a very weird time to be alive. This was also like really obvious again at church. My gender was almost like treated as an exception to the rule. One of the stories that I keep coming back to when I think about like church as a whole and its weirdness around gender is the church I attended had a reasonably small youth group. I did not have any girls my age in the youth group. The people my age were all guys. When you couple that with the fact that my interests, and for context, this was in the American South, so in Texas. So, very gendered in a lot of stereotypical ways. And so I wore dresses to church on Sunday, but I sat with the guys. We talked about action movies. We talked about the fantasy books because we were all big fantasy book people. We were all big action film people. That's what we talked about. So we did like go-kart racing for fun. Like that's what we did. No other girl at church was going to do that regardless of age. And I'll never forget one time at youth group, church leadership was there and I overheard them talking to the youth pastor and like looking at me and going like, do we need to be concerned about like the fact that it's Cam and these like 3 boys? Like that seems concerning. Like we should be encouraging boys to be friends with boys and girls to be friends with girls. And the youth group leader literally said, oh no, it's fine. It's just Cam. And so it was that ongoing notion of like, oh, it's just her, which I liked because I didn't like being, even back then, I didn't like being treated like a girl. Like my guy friends would, occasionally remember my assigned gender at birth and be, hold the door for me or, offer me their arm and it was always like, why are you being weird? Not necessarily just because of the gendered norms thing, but also because like they were my friends and I was like, just treat me like one of you. Like this is bizarre. I liked it better when you forgot that my gender was different than yours because genuinely to me at that time, and really looking back for most of my life, it wasn't it wasn't a thing. Gender was not a feature of my life. It was a bug more than anything. Because all I grew to understand was that my gender was good for exactly 3 things. It was good for ensuring that I got harassed, especially as a teenager, on public transit, walking down the street, etc. It was good for making sure that I was mistreated and not believed at the doctor's office, which we'll get to that in a minute. And it was good for humiliating me when, my clothes didn't fit, my shirt rode down, my pants, whatever. Like, that's all it was good for. So I was like happier when I was just a genderless blob in my mind. And as I liked to fool myself into thinking the minds of everyone else around me because of the chronic illness thing and the abuse, medical and otherwise, that came up as a result of that. So speaking of doctors' offices, the chronic illness thing rears its head again. So when I was 13 or 14, and I mentioned the triple D chest once again because it comes up, my mom and I were at a doctor's appointment of mine. And my mom and I were both very concerned about the symptom of my large chest because of what that meant about my hormones. Because like hormonal deficiencies, hormonal inefficiencies, like that can cause problems. And my mom's side of the family is riddled with hormone related problems. And so my mom, understandably, wanted to get out ahead of any of those problems that could arise. And she wanted to make sure that my doctor was aware of it and we could do something, whatever we could do to regulate my hormones before things went very, very, very south. So she brings this up to my doctor, and I'm sitting right there next to my mom. And my doctor, who's also a woman, asks my mom, okay, what is making you concerned that her hormones are imbalanced? And my mom gives her this look of like, are you joking? And she gestures to me and goes, well, my child is, 13, 14, however old I was, and wearing a triple D cup bra. Like that is concerning. That is not normal. And the doctor like pointedly like looked down at her own chest and looked at my mom and then looked at me and said, women like me and your mom, we would kill to have that problem. And I was just like, what a bizarre thing to say to a patient who's a minor. And my mom jumped on her immediately and was like, why did you say this to my child? That's wildly out of pocket. Like, this is not a good thing. But that was kind of the beginning of the end for me mentally in terms of like, okay, yes, my body is no longer just a sack of meat on a table for diagnostic purposes. Clearly my body and my assigned gender at birth is a fucking problem. which, spoiler alert, has never quite gone away in terms of my own sentiment. The slab of meat comment that I made earlier is because growing up, my mom always told me that my body was a slab of meat on a table, and so I shouldn't be embarrassed by whatever doctors are doing or asking me and all this other stuff, which I'm glad that she was in the room for my appointments because that sort of mindset paired with less hands-on parenting could have been disastrous from like opening the door for abuse to happen against a child who didn't know enough to know that she could say no. But I was always very good at saying no. Um, but it did leave me with this sense of like, okay, my body is just a thing. And so I never had that moment, and I will talk about this later. I have notes this time. But I never had this feeling that a lot of my friends that I was in community with as a young person, and even now, talk about, trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming friends, would talk about how they wanted their body to be on the outside the way they felt on the inside. And largely, I think because my experiences as a professional patient, I never really had that feeling. I never really understood that emotion of like wanting my body to reflect how I feel on the inside because I feel like a genderless blob and my body can't be a blob, so I just show up. And all of that is probably something to work out in therapy in some way. But the closest I can ever remember coming to that feeling of like connection between how I felt on the inside and how I wanted to be on the outside was when I was 18 and a senior in high school. I was taking a self-defense class. I was dually enrolled in college and high school to graduate high school with my associate's degree, which is a 2-year college degree, and also with my high school diploma, which would save me some money on my 4-year degree, which was awesome. I have $60,000 in debt instead of $120,000. I will take it. But I needed a physical education credit to graduate, so I took a self-defense class. And as part of this class, because it had to meet that criteria, the instructor not only drilled us in, it was like mixed martial arts style self-defense drills every Saturday. We also had to do at least 3 recorded workouts every week, which was fine because I was a very active kid and was exercising anyway. So I just would go down to the gym at the college that was a few blocks away from my family's apartment, and I would exercise and record it and whatever. And my self-defense instructor took a look once at the record that I had kept of my workouts and was like, okay, so tell me like why you're exercising outside of like just because I told you to. Like, are you exercising because you want to like be skinnier? Are you exercising because you want to have lean muscle? Are you trying to bulk up? And I was like, I'm trying to be thin because growing up I had been told that my body was wrong. My mom wanted me to look like a 90s supermodel because she was convinced that was the only way that I would get respect. And it was, I think, a disappointment when my post-puberty body had broad shoulders and broad hips. And I could not control that. That is the genetic lottery I was dealt. I take after the women on my dad's side of the family in that way. When my self-defense instructor heard me say that I wanted to be thin, he looked at me and he was like, I'm going to be real with you. I think you're going to see more results from working out if you treat your body like it was built to build muscle, because your body is clearly built to build muscle. And I had my doubts. And I also was just so tired of being browbeaten about this notion of like looking like a man, looking too masculine, looking like a boy. But I followed some of his recommendations for working out, and I started to like very, very quickly see like, cut biceps, cut shoulders, cut triceps, the more reveal of my abs. I've had abs for a while because like I danced from ages 4 to 14, so like I've always had good abs. But like I could see, I had a 6-pack for a time. Like I had muscle definition, and I loved it. I loved how it made me feel to know that I was that physically strong, but I loved how it made me look. It felt somehow like there was a connection between my mind and my body and my understanding of who I was as a human that just clicked. And that was a really cool feeling. And I imagine that that's the closest that I will get to having that experience of like my mind and body aligning with how I look on the outside. Okay, so how did I get from the moment of gender at 18 to my gender indifference, as I call it now? Ironically, it started with the internet. It started with when I became Cam from the internet. So I was online for the longest time under my legal first name, mostly because I never really saw a need to change it. However, when I started entering the querying trenches for traditional publishing and thus made like a Twitter account with my legal first and last name on it, I realized that I didn't really want to be so easily linked to my fandom shenanigans online. Not that there's anything wrong with that, with those shenanigans, but just like with a level of privacy and distance that I wanted. And so I started thinking about what kind of name I could use on the internet that would be so different from my legal name that no one could make the link or anything like that. And through trial and error, I came up with Cam because I liked that it was short and sweet and gender neutral. And then after that, because I kind of debuted, hey guys, I want to start going by Cam, and I clarified in all the spaces I was on why. And yet I think a lot of people got the vibe that it was some sort of gender egg cracking sort of thing. And so occasionally people would like default to switching up the pronouns they used for me. Instead of only she, her, they would occasionally use they. And I never minded. I actually kind of liked that. And that was kind of like the beginning of me realizing that maybe there was something not quite cisgender about me. I want to just really clearly state that to that random person in my TikTok messages earlier point, I've never claimed to be non-binary or trans. Neither of those terms ever felt like they matched my lived experience. Gender fluid or gender queer would be closer, but I still, like, that doesn't feel quite like it matches me. I don't know why. I think it implies a level of investment in gender that I don't have, which is why I started referring to myself as gender indifferent about 2 years ago. And I think a lot of this, like I said before, comes from the fact that I've been in company for years with all manner of gender nonconforming people who have talked about how they want to look on the outside, how they feel on the inside, and I've never had that feeling. I've just always been like the standing man emotion here. I just show up. It's like the pinnacle of I don't know, I just work here. That's my experience with my own gender. I have no issue checking female on a box at the doctor's office on a form, but the closest I can get to explain, I tried to explain it to someone this way once. I'm not, like, sure, I'm a woman nominally, but I'm not a girl. That's as close as I've gotten. And ironically, it was fiction that led me to the concept, the articulatable concept of gender indifference. And those characters are, of course, Camilla Hecht from The Locked Tomb, and an anime character, Hanji Zoe from Attack on Titan. And for the record, I watched Attack on Titan before I was aware that it was a controversial piece of media in many ways. Anime fandom is scary to me. I did not know enough to go digging, but there's that. So both of those characters have a carriage and a presentation that I class as like nominally a woman, maybe. Camilla, like a little bit less so than Hanji, but still, like Camilla Hecht, her function in the narrative is less about femininity and womanhood as it is just she is there and could kill you. And Hanji was like the ultra light bulb moment for me because they could easily be a man or a woman. They're drawn as androgynous, like very clearly, but that's the least interesting thing about them. And it's only because people made it a thing on the internet that it is a thing. Hanji's function in the story would not change at all regardless of the gender they were assigned at birth. And that was really nice to see. I liked that because I felt for so long like my gender was an impediment, and to see that there was a character whose existence rejected the concept of gender as being material at all was very nice, because my gender, in my mind, is the least interesting thing about me. And at the same time as I was encountering both of these characters, I was also like confronting how I navigated the world on the regular, because I'm aware to many people I'm clocked as a cis woman. I have no particular desire to change that. I don't have the energy to change that, but I do enjoy that occasionally there is a double take moment, and that the way that I dress and present is not adherent to any one set of predetermined gender norms. I think that gender can be and should be whatever you want it to be. And one of the analogies I always use, or I guess comparison stories, I don't know. My sister is an incredibly feminine person. She feels very bonded to her gender. She feels very bonded to notions of womanhood and girlhood. She genuinely loves wearing her hair long and loose. She loves dresses and skirts. She loves applying makeup. All of these traditionally gendered as female things. She enjoys that immensely. She is proud to be a cisgender woman. She has never, to my knowledge, questioned her gender or her appearance as it pertains to gender norms. I do not revel in my gender as such. My assigned gender at birth is just like a thing that I have to check on a form, and it's just kind of there. And I don't really care either way. And as a child, like growing up, I remember very clearly saying to my mom that I felt like I missed some sort of girl gene that my mom and my sister got, because they both reveled in their femininity, reveled in being a woman. And I was like, yeah, I'm a woman, but I'm not like a girl. Like, I'm just here. And it took me a long time to realize that it wasn't even a desire to stubbornly, like, not adhere to norms. It wasn't me trying to be different and quirky. It was just indifference. I didn't care. My gender was the least interesting thing about me. And 9 times of 10, it was just in my way. Even in college, like, I'll never forget, I did this one experiment once with someone on my college newspaper where I signed some emails requesting interviews with my given first name, which is like, you look at it, you think that's a female name. And then I signed some other emails with my first initial and my middle initial, which is a semi-commonly used name by any gender. So people could look at it and think that's a man, that's a woman, or just not think anything at all if you are, like, not a boomer, for instance. And so out of that experiment, when people could not instantly clock my gender or my assumed gender by my name, they were faster to email me back. And that just kind of underscored for me, like, wow, this actually sucks. I don't like this at all. No, thank you. Um, so yeah. So that coupled with all of that. Wait a minute, sorry. So all of that to say, my experience with gender is that it is irrelevant to me, and I don't really see that ever changing. I could be wrong, because I think to be alive is to change. It's kind of like that one saying that went around Twitter and TikTok for so long, how to be loved is to be changed. I think in a similar vein, to live is to change. There could be a time in my life where I will have some sort of moment where I suddenly realize my gender is something completely different, and then I'm not indifferent to it. But as of now, my gender indifference remains, and it's kind of fun sometimes to cosplay womanhood. At Katsucon, I had a full beat face and makeup on, and I put on a black dress to go to the formal ball, and that was fun. But there are many times when I just want to throw on a suit, tie my hair up, and look as androgynous as possible, and that is what it is. I also paid a lot of attention to how I felt in different cosplay, which is kind of a funny thing to reflect on. But when I was doing so, I was in cosplay for a good chunk of that weekend, and probably did way too many cosplays. And I felt the most comfortable when I was cosplaying characters like Vi from Arcane, because the way that she moves and maneuvers and dresses and presents is fairly similar to how I do. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm a butch lesbian, because I'm not. I have made that clear. But what I am saying is that I paid attention to what felt the best on me, and what felt the best on me was my ability to flex between all of these other characters. In one day, I went from cosplaying Jujutsu Kaisen's Maki Zenin in her uniform skirt and tights and boots, to cosplaying Vi from Arcane, who is the complete opposite in almost every way. And both of those felt equally comfortable and chill. And I was just kind of like, obviously cosplay is what you make of it. There are plenty of people that cosplay and have no gender feelings assigned to it, but I think because I'm chronically ill and have such a low tolerance for, like, stimuli, I have to be comfortable in my cosplays. And the fact that I felt physically comfortable dressing up in all these different ways that gender can present was very telling to me in my own mind. So every time I outline a podcast episode, I'm always like, okay, why am I talking about this? And, like, usually it's because it's on my mind, but also often it's also because I have some sort of other point to make. And this is my point to make. I highly doubt that I'm the only one who's ever had this experience of gender indifference, but I haven't really encountered, like, a lot of people talking about it. So here I am talking about it. When I was a young person growing up in fandom, my exposure to all manner of gender and sexuality related conversations came from people around me. Older members of the queer community, members of the queer community who were my age, and even members of the queer community who were younger than me. And I think especially now, like I said at the beginning of this episode, the more we talk about this sort of thing, the more empowered other people will be in their quest for self-understanding and self-growth. I think the more that we talk about these experiences, the more that we give people who are coming after us a vocabulary to talk about their own experiences with gender, their own deconstruction of gender, their own journeys of self-growth and self-understanding. A lot of the times, the only way that I'm able to find articulatable ways to explain what I've gone through is because of fiction or because of real people talking about and examining these issues. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I believe that human beings were designed to be storytellers. We were designed to collect and use the words, the expressions, the language of other people to put into perspective, to put into context, and to put into words our own experiences. Obviously, you should give credit where it's due, cite your sources. I used to be an academic, and you can tell because I'm sixth house through and through. But that is one of the most important things to me about having these conversations is I would not be who I am without the people who came before me, the members of the queer community that I was part of from the time that I was 13 years old. I probably wouldn't have figured out that I was bi until very, very recently without the impact that people talking about their experiences had on me, and I think that it can be the same the other way around. I also feel like, and this line of thinking was admittedly mostly inspired by that wild message I got on TikTok. I think that especially now, the internet has given a lot of people a misconception of what different identities, different genders, different sexualities should look like. There is no one correct way to be trans or non-binary or gender non-conforming or gender indifferent or literally anything. Stop it. I wrote that in bold, red, underlined in my outline. Stop it. When we, as a internet culture, started having these conversations about how you have to look a certain way to be valid as a queer person, as a trans person, as a non-binary person, like, that is just very weird. It's really, really weird. And I don't mean weird in a good way, gang. This is a whole other topic, honestly, this conversation around, just as one example, medical transition and ableism and gender essentialism. But, like, it's weird because it's none of your business. Like, who are we to sit here and declare who is, as an example, a valid non-binary person based on how they look? That's weird. It is also, more often than not, rooted in misogyny and white supremacy, which is also weird. Don't do that. I have long held the theory that human beings, it's not that we make snap judgments out of malice. I believe that 9 times out of 10 human beings make snap judgments about each other because we want to protect ourselves by putting people in a box so that we can understand them and so we can interact with them in ways that we feel are safe. I don't necessarily agree that that is the way it goes. But what I do know is that if you look at someone and you immediately mentally label them as not queer enough or not non-binary or not this or not that and put them in a mental box, that is doing your fellow human a disservice. And that is not kind. And I don't think it's very smart to navigate the world with these overarching assumptions of what queerness, transness, non-binariness, gender, nonconformity, what all that looks like. There's no right or wrong way to do it. As long as you're not weaponizing it, and as long as you are as open and understanding of people who look different than you, navigate the world different than you, you're fine. And I think that, especially I see it in the younger set. Like, I'm 26. Like, I'm not, you know, I don't need a cane, but I see it in, like, the generation below mine, those who are teenagers right now. They're on the internet accusing people of faking it because they don't look androgynous, but they say they're non-binary. Newsflash, that's not how it always works. I'm just using myself as an example all over the place because it's what I do. So I have had every length of hair imaginable. And typically when I see these young people coming at individuals for not looking non-binary, it's because they don't have the, you know, traditionally thought of, you know, short androgynous haircut. I'm here to tell you, you would still, young people who are saying these things, find ways to disregard people's gender, even if their hair was short. And I know this because when I first started using Cam as my name on the internet, and then, like, you know, publicly changed things to having she, they pronouns, I had short hair. Short, androgynous haircut. That was me. And still, the comments abounded. Oh, interesting that you've changed your pronouns. Was that a spur of the moment thing, or is this like a trend, or are you serious? That was actually something that someone said to me. The reason being, I have a feminine face. That was actually the reason told to me. And if you're watching this on video, you can see when I pull all my hair back, my face, because of my high cheekbones and my pinchy cheeks, I look to most observers feminine. Now, it's slightly offset by the fact that I have a squared off jaw, which I actually really like. But the argument for me in my early 20s being harassed and talked down to for changing my pronoun usage publicly to she, they from she, her was that I was faking it because I still look like a woman. I can't change my face. I don't want to change my face. And I was growing my hair out because keeping it short and having to maintain it was like really annoying. But none of that matters. It is not your damn business. And like, if nothing else, it's creepy. Like, it's weird, gang. Why are you spending time thinking about how someone like chooses to dress and do their hair and like do self-grooming? Like, dude, it's invasive. It's weird. Stop it. It's bizarre. I don't really understand. Like, but I don't know. It's weird. It all just feels really weird to me. Like, my attitude by and large is live and let live. It's the in real life equivalent of don't like, don't read in fan fiction, right? You just vibe. You're just chilling. Not my business. It is my responsibility as a human being in community with other human beings to use the correct name and the correct pronouns and to speak kindly, respectfully, and genuinely to everyone I encounter. Anything else, it's none of my business. And I'm not saying that I've cracked the code to being a good human, because I haven't. I don't think anyone has. But it is my responsibility to be that way for the good of the communities in which I find myself. And I would urge all of you to do the same and try to kill your inner cop, as it were. Because, you know, the second that we start policing how other people are showing up in terms of, oh, well, are they queer enough? Are they this enough? Are they that enough? That's cop behavior. And especially now, especially now, there is no place in our community for cops, even the ones inside your head. So, with all of that said, thank you for coming to my rant about gender. Thank you also to everyone who has celebrated the return of this podcast for season 2. It's been really, really fun to chat with you on TikTok and via Substack and everything else. I've had a lot of fun bringing the podcast back. It would be awesome to continue to grow it, especially as TikTok's future remains uncertain. But yeah, thank you for celebrating this with me. Thank you for being here. Feel free to check the description or read more section, depending on where you're listening to this, for links where you can find me elsewhere and support me. Especially, I would love to start bringing more people over to my YouTube channel in case TikTok does go away. The opportunity to passively monetize some of the things that I do on YouTube is kind of attractive to me because my cat needs a $7,800 surgery and I am stressed about that payment. But yeah, thank you for being here with me. And until next week, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and don't do anything I wouldn't do. Choose chaos, though. I'm always a big fan of choosing chaos. Bye!